You should say his name. I dare you.
Candyman.
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 Don't say that.
The other day, I set aside some time to watch Candyman 1992 before heading to the theater to check out Candyman 2021, and I've got to say that this was definitely a great decision. I'm positive that I would have enjoyed Candyman 2021 just the same without directly connecting it to its 1992 predecessor, but doing so provided me with a deeper and clearer lore set to work with. Having clarity is important when approaching Candyman as a franchise, as the main consistent thread through these two entries is lore and the power of myth, though the 1992 and 2021 films approach this viewpoint from completely different perspectives. There will be spoilers moving forward, so if you've not seen Candyman 1992 or 2021 and would like to have an unbiased viewing, I recommend doing so prior to continuing with this video. Otherwise, for the familiar, or those unbothered by the idea of spoilers, we will be taking a deep dive into the idea of Candyman not being an individual, but as William Burke puts it in the 2021 film,
Candyman ain't a he. Candyman's the whole damn hive.
In order to understand this in-world interpretation of the Candyman mythos, it is important to start at the beginning of the story with the 1992 film. Written and directed by Bernard Rose as an adaptation of a Clive Barker story titled The Forbidden, one of many tales included in his Books of Blood series. The original story centered around segregation and the culture that develops in less economically developed areas, and Rose was able to transition the story from its original Liverpool location to the infamous Cabrini Green housing projects in Chicago. We follow Helen Lyle and her collaborator Bernie Walsh as they conduct a story on urban legends, with the focus falling on a killer named Candyman that terrorized residents of Cabrini Green in the past. The attribution of real-life crimes to a phantom like Candyman not only serves as a symbol of the post-traumatic stress that arises from living in dangerous and disadvantageous areas, but the academic fascination with him serves as a secondary symbol of the white fascination with the quote-unquote ghetto. The academic invasion into the Cabrini Green projects also serves as a sort of premonition for the eventual gentrification that would envelop Cabrini Green, not to mention several other disadvantaged areas across the United States. Back in the 1990s, when my friends and I scared ourselves silly watching this film over and over, I was so hung up on Candyman as a phantom entity that much of the subtext surrounding Helen Lyles went right over my head. For starters, her obsession with the Candyman figure was not only communicated through her lustful gaze when he was mentioned, but it was reflected in her single-minded focus that eventually led her to repeatedly inserting herself into lives and locations she had no business being in. When Jake speaks of Candyman getting him, it is clear that he is talking about the leader of the overlords that eventually attacks Helen, the same man who is likely responsible for the murder of Ruthie Jean. And yet Helen is unable to realize or accept that Jake is talking about anything other than the ghost of Daniel Robitaille. Helen further crosses the line by essentially forcing herself into Anne-Marie McCoy's life, which is an even bigger issue when one realizes that Helen is the one who summoned Candyman in the first place. Candyman essentially uses Helen as a Trojan horse in order to gain access to Anne-Marie's infant son, which kicks off a series of events leading to Helen Lyle's arrest, committal, escape, and eventual death at the hands of Cabrini Green residents she incessantly invaded. What makes the 2021 Candyman so interesting is the way that Jordan Peele, Win Rosenfeld, and director Nia DaCosta used the Helen Lyles story to immediately drive the power of myth even further via a skewed retelling of already cloudy events via Troy Cartwright, the brother of key figure Breonna Cartwright. Troy's story is the genesis of Anthony McCoy's eventual spiral into his fateful downfall, as Troy's skewered retelling sent Anthony into a curiosity spiral that grew into inspiration, obsession, and eventually self-sacrifice. In this sense, if Troy is the one responsible for planting the seed, then former Cabrini Green resident William Burke could be considered the gardener in the way that he fuels Anthony's fascination with the Candyman mythos. Much like Anthony, as we take the journey, we not only discover that the Candyman lore has many nuanced levels, but it is a pure trigger for anyone attempting to hide or run away from their own trauma, much like Brianna does when it comes to the inspiration-driven madness and eventual suicide of her father. In the way that the 1992 story is very much written and taken in from the white perspective, the 2021 film stands on the opposite end of the spectrum and shifts the perspective deep into the black experience. As a result of this shift, the white gaze that Helen symbolizes is also flipped, so much so that Helen becomes a boogeyman-esque figurehead meant to symbolize the gentrification that Anthony, Brianna, and their friends benefit from. As a result of this gentrification, the new occupants of once horrific areas are allowed to gatekeep, which leads to the white gaze receiving one more degree of access via the presence of black artists, musicians, and so on. With this infrastructure in place, those who once stood on the outside looking in are now able to monetize the very thing that drove their outside fears. Ironically, many of these people who benefit off of this ecosystem fail to realize that they are smothering and eliminating the history, roots, and culture of these black communities, which disconnects many of the people from the source that allows them to be so creative. All of this, however, is secondary subtext to the main focus of the film, the generational trauma that is born from these disadvantaged communities and existences. Anthony McCoy, through his horrific journey of self-discovery, opens our eyes to a lineage of phantoms that, in all honesty, are actually warnings of how cruel and unjust the world can be for those born into the black experience. If we go down the line of Candyman figures we are shown in these two films, the bigger picture suddenly begins to develop in a way that mirrors the historical black experience in America that is often swept under the rug. Daniel Robitaille is the victim of quote-unquote mob justice due to a tryst with a white woman that her father frowned upon, which led to his capture, torture, the sawing off of his right hand in order to place a hook on it, and his eventual death by bees. Sherman Fields was a man who happened to have a hook in place of his right hand, and due to his history of giving candy to children, he finds himself the chief suspect when razor blades begin showing up in the same candy he hands out. Fields is discovered after hiding from authorities, and once discovered, he is beaten until he is unrecognizable before he is killed on the spot. Though Anthony's journey into his position as Candyman is not as swift, his tragedy is rooted in the fact that he is the son of Anne-Marie McCoy, the same woman that Helen Lyles allowed to become victim to Daniel Robitaille's Candyman, meaning that he was the stolen baby from the first film. Had Troy not sent Anthony down the Candyman path, perhaps Anthony would not have unlocked his tragic past, not to mention set loose the aforementioned Hive on those he loved, and Chicago at large. Now, this may be speculation on my part, but it feels like Anthony summoned Daniel Robitaille while doing the summoning process with Brianna. This is based purely on Anthony's unknown connection to Robitaille, as it seems like this summoning completed Robitaille's original intention of making the young man his victim, an ultimate sacrifice used to keep his legend alive for as long as possible. Anthony's art piece is a bit more complex when it comes to summoning. His Say My Name installation and the notorious murder connected to it on opening night seemed to give Daniel Robitaille reinvigoration, and I believe that every attack we see up to that of Finley Stevens is at the hands of Robitaille's Candyman. At the same time, Anthony now has an awareness of Sherman Fields, so while Robitaille feeds his thirst for blood, Fields haunts Anthony, though Fields is also clearly afraid and traumatized by his connection to Anthony, much in the same way that Anthony is disgusted and confused by Fields. Once Anthony is made aware of his tragic past by his mother, this awareness pushes Anthony into a fate-driven acceptance where he eventually assumes the role as the leader of the Hive. Based on the floating movement and the brief glimpse of Chuck Taylor's in the compact mirror on the bathroom floor, I think it's safe to attribute the high school massacre to Anthony's Candyman, with the final massacre that saves Brianna being a team job committed by Robitaille and Anthony's respective Candyman. Praise must be given to Peele, Rosenfeld, and DaCosta for their ability to purposely interject social commentary into their story without the need for a moral soapbox. Their advancement of the Candyman lore not only serves as a timely reminder of how continued violence against the black community has a lasting traumatic impact that spans generations, but it also amplifies Candyman's position within the realm of horror genre all-stars. When Candyman first came onto the scene in 1992, he was part of a very small fraternity of black voices within the world of horror, joining Ben from Night of the Living Dead and Blackula as some of the only representations, though Ganja and Hess deserves much more praise than it gets. The success of the first Candyman film opened the doors for the emergence of characters like Blade, Spawn, and films like Tales from the Hood, and Candyman even managed to put a trilogy of films into production prior to 2021's direct sequel to the 1992 original. Have you seen Candyman 1992 or 2021 yet? What about Farewell to the Flesh or Day of the Dead? Do you appreciate horror that manages to provide social commentary? If so, let me know in the comments below, and don't be afraid to share your thoughts on the ideas presented in this video. Candyman marked my return to the theaters, as I had not been to one since I saw 1917 and early 2020, and I must say that it was a wonderful way to return to the cinemas. I'm looking forward to getting my old theater-going ways back into gear, so be on the lookout for more videos like this one if any particular flick I see happens to get the mental gears going as Candyman opened the floodgates. I try my best to put these ideas together in a presentable manner, and I know that my 3 killer theory may be a bit heavy on the speculation, but that's what good films do. Feel free to visit DOOMonFILM.tumblr.com for more of my thoughts, reviews, and analysis on films, including my thoughts on both of the Candyman films covered in this video. For my other creative ventures, visit ChiefandTheDoomsdayDevice.com. And if you like what you see here, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, keep that love for film burning bright.